So, welcome to the 1% podcast. Today you have me, and today it's actually a very special podcast because it's celebrating 1 year of me doing the 1% podcast, which for me is actually quite an achievement. What I wanted to come on today to talk about was what my key learning or takeaway has been from this whole process so far, having the conversations with the guys that I've had, and then ultimately the process of doing the podcast and what I've learned from it. And the reason I want to do that is because the underlying theme, I think, is incredibly powerful. And it's something that I talk about a lot in my coaching. And it's a principle I like to live my life by as best that I can. And what is that? Well, ultimately, it's perfect is the enemy of good enough. Doing something is better than nothing. And if you want to get something in life, something you need in life, ultimately, you have to fucking start. You have to do the fucking thing. And taking some form of action trumps sitting, stasis, and procrastination. Now, the podcast itself, I believe, has been incredibly powerful. I've had some amazing conversations over the last 12 months with some amazing individuals, the majority of which are guys that I work with, my clients in my coaching programs, talking about their journeys from struggling, burnout, stress, being unhealthy, and turning that around through work on themselves, of course, facilitated through my coaching process. Those conversations have been really powerful to help the guys who are having them because it helps them sit, take stock and reflect on how far they've come and the impact that it's had. But anyone that's been listening to those conversations and watched those conversations within their network, it's helped because hearing someone that struggled, relating to their struggle, and then seeing them turn it around, I think is really powerful because it gives license to someone else watching or listening to go, you know what, actually I can do this. It is possible. And no matter where you are in life, there's always something that you can do. But again, the key takeaway here is taking action for it. And to be transparent, these conversations are an amazing advert for what I do in my business because the guys are talking about going from a place where they've been struggling to a place where they're really empowered and thriving. And part of the conversation is about helping others in the network, but part of it's about helping my business because me having those conversations helps others see that there is a process that I can work on to help you. This podcast today isn't an advert for what I do, but it's just about me explaining that. And what I think about when I sit here and reflect on, well, what have I really learned from this so far myself? Yep, the bit we just said there, the powerful conversations, the insights, and just listening to other stories of other men who are going on a journey of self-development. I think that's really powerful and not in a wanky, wishy-washy way. It helps me in myself and my journey and me being better, but I know it helps others. And that in itself is powerful, right? And there's lots of nuances that we can take from that. And if you listen to any of the podcasts and the ones that are coming up, you'll take those. But the more meta overarching principle here is perfect is the enemy of good enough. Getting on and just fucking doing something and just starting is the powerful thing. And the reason I say that is the reason I started this podcast, or when I started this podcast, I'd been procrastinating on that for probably a good 2 or 3 years. And it was January last year, as I record this is January 2026, January 2025, when I decided, no, I'm actually just going to fucking start. But also that idea and principle is kind of where the main coaching program that I now run came from. So rewind 5 years into the past, I've been doing lots of one-to-one coaching. I like to think getting amazing, powerful results from my clients, really impactful, noticing a lot of common themes within those coaching calls with the gents that I'm working with. And my coach that I was working with at the time, a business coach / mentor, was saying, well, look, Luke, if you want to grow the business and help more people, you need to find a way of being able to scale what you're offering and what you're doing. And as the one-to-one's amazing and you can charge a premium to do that, but both from a business commercial perspective, but also a growth perspective, it's capped, right? Because you're selling time for money and there's only one of you. And if you have to spend an hour talking to someone, that's not a scalable model, notwithstanding it's powerful. And I still do some one-to-one coaching. So for about a year, I ummed and ahed about a group coaching program. How am I going to run it? What am I going to do? How am I going to put it together? What should I do? And what should the systems be? And how should I automate it? And I kind of kept myself stuck and worrying about the what ifs and what if no one goes into it and what if people don't like it and what if it doesn't work? And then eventually I was like, right, I actually just need to fucking do this. You know, it's not about overanalyzing and thinking. I think there needs to be some form of structure. So I worked out at a rough high level, like how I want to structure the program. And I mapped that out. The way that my program is delivered, there's some video elements and some talking within that to help facilitate some of the coaching elements that we deliver. And so I was like, right, well, I'm going to record the first 2 weeks of that content for the program. So then I've got something. it also gives me quite a harsh burning bridge if I decide to move forward with the program, because I've got to get the rest of the content recorded. So it puts a fire under my arse. And then I was like, well, I now need to sell this program. Now, I was very confident that something that I deliver was going to have an impact, because I was taking what was thousands and thousands of hours of very powerful, successful coaching from a one-to-one perspective, distilling that into a formulated process, and kind of refining the key elements and the repeating patterns that I always saw, and putting that into a distilled program, right? And so I was fairly confident that it would deliver great results. You never guarantee these things, you don't know. And so then I was like, well, I now need to sell that program, and I need someone to go and run it. Right? And so I was like, well, what if not enough people do it, and how am I going to run it? And how I wanted to run the program was like an evergreen thing. So people would it'd run continuously, and people would run through. That's all well and good once that's running. But before you start, you haven't got anyone in it. So how do you start? Well, you need to start with somebody in it. And you're also talking about a program that's powerful and can help people get results. But ultimately, the total truth is that program is untested. You know that you've done, thousands of hours of coaching yourself, and you're confident that you can deliver. And so ultimately, you have to just rip the plaster off and get on with it. So I was like, right, I'm going to launch it, put some content out on social media, launched it. I got 2 guys to sign up. So then it's technically a group program. I wanted it to be busier. I didn't have any other sales calls for that time to get anyone else in with the date that I'd set, because I set myself a date to do it. And so then I spoke to my younger brother, who I knew was struggling a little bit. I said, Josh, I've got this program. I'd be interested. I'd like you to help me do it. I want to have someone else in the group, but you need to be completely committed. He joined as well. I have a group coaching program. I launched it. Now, that was 5 years ago. That program has now evolved into what is the blueprint, and then the following program, the collective now, which is a refined, very powerful coaching process that I've built, refined, and tweaked over the last 5 years, and it gets absolutely incredible results. The guys who speak on this podcast every single week are guys that are going through that process. I still do some one-to-one coaching, but I'd say it's 5% of what I do in my business. The rest is the group process. Ultimately, I launched it. It went amazingly well. Guys absolutely loved it. Got great results. We started to get the social proof, and we built it. And that program is now basically the lifeblood of my entire business. It's the core part of what I do, and the following program from that. But that started with, well, I don't know everything. It's slightly uncertain. To get this launched, I need to take some action and commit, and I just need to do it. Now, was it perfect? No. Was it absolutely exactly how it looks today when it's been refined over the last 5 years? Absolutely not. But it was enough to get going, and then I did it, I launched it, and it went very, very well, and it's now evolved into what it was today. Now, if I'd never taken that first step and gone balls to it, I'm taking some imperfect action to move forward, I wouldn't have the program I've got today, and I wouldn't have built the business that I built off the back of that program. And so the key learning for that is that actually just going, you know what, it's not perfect, just do it and get started, was incredibly powerful, right? And so if I take that learning, and that's kind of what happened January 2025 for the podcast, probably for 2 or 3 years, when that group program was described as evolved and was building up, I was like, I get clients say, people say, Luke, you should have a podcast. Some of the stuff you're saying online is great, and what you learn from your clients is great. Yeah, great. And I kept saying, well, what should it be? And what should the format be? And should it have guests? And should it not? And how am I going to do it? And where am I going to host it? And all this stuff. And so because of that, I just kept putting it off. And then earlier in the year, I actually did what was at the time not a podcast. It was a LinkedIn Live, which is what I was doing with a lot of my clients. The clients that I've worked with, I'd jump on a LinkedIn Live, talk about the experience, and we'd put that on LinkedIn and it'd go off into the ether. I had a client that I was working with, John, who actually was the first person on the podcast. He was, oh, look, we're looking forward to coming on your podcast. And I was like, in my head, that's not a podcast. And he said that. And so we did the LinkedIn Live, and I was like, hold up a second. I talk to people basically every week in a podcast format. I just put it on a different platform. Why don't I just take that, call that a podcast, and launch it? And it was John calling a podcast to help me do that. So I did. And then here we are, like a year later. Does it get millions of views yet? Nope. But I'm building on that. Do I care about that? Nope. But because it's powerful, it's intentional, it helps guys process and talk about what they want and need. I think it gives voice to guys to talk about the struggles, but then also the empowering thing about how we take action to change that, which I think is incredibly powerful for men in general. And so I'm not saying this like to wave my knob around and go, aren't I amazing? The point was, I was like, well, rather than just intellectualizing everything I need to do, I will just fucking do a podcast. And so I took that recording to John, put it up online, did the little bits in the back end that you need to do for a podcast, and launched it. And of course, it's evolving over time now. And that's what's happening now. And right now, another example of perfect is anything good enough. If you can't see this, if you're listening, you'll be able to see it. What you actually see as my background is like a window, a load of gym stuff on the floor, because we've just moved house. in my old house where we were in November, when we moved in November 2025, I had a nice little podcast studio. That's not there yet. It's just been built in the garden. Right. So I could have waited for this podcast and said, you know what, it's been a year. Why not I wait till it's a few more weeks, it's done, it's shiny, and that can be the wrap-up podcast. But that is not in the spirit of what we just described. Perfect's the enemy of good enough. I could have said, I'm going to stop the podcast for a bit because I haven't got the shiny background. It doesn't look quite as smart as usual, and just wait until that. But again, perfect's the enemy of good enough, and I wouldn't have had the conversations that I've had. And so the key learning here, as I step back, is that you're never going to be certain exactly where something's going to end up. You're never going to know. But if you've got something that you want or need, if you don't take action to start a path towards that, you're never going to get anywhere. Now, that action might fail. It might go wrong. It might go pear-shaped. But then if that happens, well, the beauty there is as long as you're objective and you can take a step back, you can learn from that and then continue. The only way you don't get where you want is not starting. And if you start, you can get where you want to be. No, is this the biggest podcast in the world? Nope. And that's not really my intention. But now I said I wanted a podcast. I wanted a vehicle to be able to present and discuss and showcase the conversations and the power of men working on themselves. I've now got that. It's been a great vehicle to help my business as well, because if other people are interested in working with me, I can show them some of these podcast episodes, and it gives breadth and depth to the conversation we have and the impact that it has. Again, totally transparent, but it also helps others as well. And so in my mind, everyone wins. But the reason I'm sitting here now, being able to say I've done a podcast for last year and we're on episode 49, is because I started last January. And I started with imperfect action, without an exact plan. But now I'm here and I've got something I can build and grow. And for me, that's a real powerful lesson. And I'm taking that into 2026 because I've also been saying for the last couple of years with my business, I would love to offer what I do in a group format for businesses in a B2B setting, in a corporate setting. But again, how would I do it? How would it run? The majority of guys that I work with, front facing is men, right? You can't have just working with men going into a business and corporate setting. It's completely not right, and rightly so, right? I do work with ladies. I don't have a group program, but it's one-to-one. So how could I run what I've done for hundreds or nearly thousands of men now within my group programs within a business? Because having talked to some of the leaders that I work with, recognizing that looking at your life and how you show up holistically has a profound impact both on yourself but also your work performance. And that's been shown time and time again. Well, earlier this year, I had a conversation with one of my clients I was working with who's been through my processes. I was doing some one-to-one coaching with, and I said, I could run what I've done for you and your business. He was like, great, well, let's do a pilot. We did a pilot, imperfect action, and ran it. Went amazingly well. The feedback's been incredible. That has then turned into a longer-term contract for me and my business. But then now I've got a case study that I can talk about, which we will refine and tweak. And there's processes and things that when we ran the pilot helped us learn bits that we will change for the next phase. But then I've now got something that I can take that's tangible, which I can then go to other businesses with and run with. And that's something that I very much want to focus on for this year alongside my B2C program, which is the main program as I discussed at the start. But again, I needed to take action and start imperfectly. And if I hadn't done that, I'd have tried to make this perfect corporate thing that's going to look really shiny. Well, I probably would have never got anywhere. Rather than having a conversation with someone who I trust and he trusts me, and then we decided to trial something within his business and it's gone very, very well, well, then that's now turned into something else. And I'm going to take that and build it. But again, it comes from, I wanted to do something. I had a good idea, but I wasn't certain, and I took action. And so I think the key thing here is with whatever you're working on in life, it's, if you don't take a step to change, if you don't take action, you're never going to get there. You'll get more of the status quo, so you can't fail, but you can never win either. And I think life's too short for that. And for the men I work with and I talk to every day, I think they would all agree. So my key learning for this is perfect is the enemy of good enough. There's a quote that Ryan Holiday talks about, our king of stoicism. And it kind of speaks to the same thing, which is self-belief is overrated. Give yourself evidence. And I think that fits in nicely with this stuff here, is because you could say with the self-belief bit, it's like, well, I've got to have the perfect plan, and it's got to look right, and I've got to understand everything, and I've got to mitigate all the risks, and only then in this perfect state can I do the thing that I need. It's like, no, just fucking show yourself you can. Take a step forward and give yourself the confidence that you can. So that's my key learning, and that's the key learning I'm going to really push and take into 2026, and that's what I'm going to phase in for the podcast as well. So I hope that's been insightful and interesting. I thought it'd be great to share my learnings and insights from this. If anyone is listening and they are interested in seeing how I can help, both in a personal setting or in that more commercial B2B setting with empowering some of your staff or yourself, drop me a note in the comments or find me a DM and we can have a conversation about how I can help. On that note, next week we'll be back with more men talking about working on themselves, the power that it's had and the long-term impact that it's having. And we've got some amazing conversations coming up because I work with some amazing people. Have a fantastic week. Have a great start to the year, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.